The sun dipped low over the sprawling expanse of the ranch, painting the fields with strokes of gold and amber, and a gentle wind whispered through the tall grass as if carrying secrets from distant lands. At 70 years old, Jeb Hawthorne, the rancher who had seen decades pass like the changing seasons, leaned against the weathered wooden fence, his hands calloused but steady, eyes scanning the horizon with a mix of pride and weariness. This land had been his life's work, every acre soaked with sweat, every barn corner holding memories of love, loss, and relentless determination. Yet, for all of his years, he had felt an emptiness that no harvest, no herd, no storm-weathered cabin could fill. He had known companionship, fleeting moments of joy, and the quiet comfort of solitude, but something, or someone, was missing from the quiet rhythm of his life. It was on a cool autumn evening that the news came. A stranger had arrived in town, a woman unlike any Jeb had ever seen. She was called Eleanor, a giantess in stature yet gentle in demeanor, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. Rumors had traveled faster than the wind. She had inherited a mysterious fortune from a distant relative, and now she was seeking something she had always lacked: roots, a place to belong. Villagers whispered about her height, her strength, and the aura of authority that seemed to surround her. But they also spoke of her loneliness, a yearning for connection that mirrored the emptiness Jeb himself had carried for decades. The first time Jeb saw her was at the town's small general store. She entered with a quiet dignity, her tall frame bending slightly to avoid the doorframe, and Jeb felt an unfamiliar stir of curiosity and something deeper, something almost like destiny. Their eyes met for the briefest of moments, and in that instant, a silent understanding passed between them, a recognition, not of past acquaintance, but of lives that had been waiting to converge. Eleanor approached the counter, her voice calm yet resonant, asking for provisions for someone planning to settle on the outskirts of the county. Jeb, who rarely spoke unless necessary, found himself offering assistance, guiding her through the nuances of ranch life, the ways of the land, and the tools she would need to begin her new chapter. Over the next few weeks, their encounters became frequent. Eleanor visited the ranch, walking the fields, inspecting the barns, and listening intently as Jeb recounted stories of years gone by. There was laughter, a kind of companionship that neither had realized they craved. She admired his resilience, the way he moved with purpose even as age had slowed his step, and he admired her courage, the way she faced each challenge without hesitation, despite the weight of expectations and whispers from the town. Slowly, an unspoken bond formed, delicate as the first frost of winter yet as persistent as the roots of the ancient oaks that dotted the property. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Jeb invited Eleanor to the old wooden porch of his ranch house. The wind carried the scent of hay and earth, and the distant mountains were painted in lavender and rose. Sitting there in companionable silence, Jeb spoke of his life, of mistakes made and lessons learned, of loves lost and victories won. Eleanor listened, her eyes reflecting a mixture of empathy and recognition, as if she too carried scars that only another could understand. In that shared space of vulnerability, the foundation of trust was laid, stronger than any fence or stone wall he had ever built. But the town was not silent. Whispers grew into cautious warnings. Some villagers questioned the union of the aged rancher and the giant bride-to-be, while others speculated about Eleanor's intentions. Rumors, however, were powerless against the genuine connection blossoming between them. Jeb and Eleanor discovered that age, stature, and societal expectations mattered little when hearts aligned, when shared dreams and mutual respect created a bond unshakable by gossip or doubt. The chapter closes with Jeb standing at the edge of his fields at dusk, Eleanor's hand resting in his, both looking out over the horizon, a future uncertain yet hopeful stretching before them. He realized that life's harvest was not only the crops or the cattle but the moments, rare and profound, that filled a heart long thought weathered and barren. And as he turned to Eleanor with a tender smile, he knew that the real journey was only beginning, and that what they had found in each other was worth every challenge, every whispered doubt, every lonely year that had led them to this moment. Winter came slowly to the Hawthorne ranch, frosting the edges of barns and the tops of rolling hills, transforming the familiar landscape into a silent kingdom of ice and silver. Jeb moved with care through the fields, each breath visible in the cold air, while Eleanor followed closely, her steps steady and sure despite her towering frame. The ranch, once quiet and somber, now felt alive with shared purpose. Together, they repaired fences, tended to the cattle, and even planted a small garden, tiny green shoots defying the frost. Much like their own fledgling relationship, every task became a lesson in partnership, in trust, and in the discovery that two very different souls could merge into a single force. But as life on the ranch grew brighter, challenges from the outside world began to encroach. Some townsfolk, uncomfortable with Eleanor's imposing presence and her sudden closeness to Jeb, started to spread suspicion, subtle yet biting. "What does she want from the old man?" they whispered. "Is she after his fortune, or is it something else?" Rumors, fueled by jealousy and fear of change, reached Eleanor's ears. She felt the sting of judgment for the first time, even as her heart longed only for honesty and connection. Jeb, sensing her unease, reassured her with a gentle firmness that only decades of experience could lend. "Ignore them," he said, his voice steady as the mountains. "Let them talk. What matters is here." And he pressed a hand to his chest. Eleanor, despite the strength she had carried all her life, found herself leaning on him, drawing comfort from a man who had weathered storms far longer than she had imagined. Amidst the trials, their bond deepened in ways neither had anticipated. Nights on the porch stretched longer, filled with stories of youth, regrets, hopes, and dreams. Eleanor shared her past, the loneliness of growing up different, the weight of expectations, and the desire for a home that truly accepted her. Jeb, in turn, shared tales of lost, the family he had watched fade, friends who had passed, opportunities missed, and the quiet longing that had haunted him all these years. Together, they realized that love was not about perfection or age or appearances. It was about choosing to face life side by side, trusting another with your heart, even when the world questioned your choice. The turning point came during a particularly harsh winter storm. Snow piled high against the barn doors, and the wind howled across the plains like a chorus of warnings. A young calf was trapped in the icy pens, its cries piercing the raging storm. Jeb, frail in body but steadfast in spirit, tried to reach it, but the storm's fury forced him back. Eleanor, seeing his struggle, braved the storm with unmatched courage, lifting and guiding the frightened animal to safety. That night, as they huddled together by the fire, exhausted but victorious, Jeb realized that Eleanor was more than a companion. She was a partner, a force that complemented his own strengths, and a legacy he could leave behind, not just in land and property, but in love and resilience. Spring eventually returned, melting the snow and bringing life back to the fields. The ranch blossomed with renewed energy, a mirror of the hope that Eleanor and Jeb had nurtured together. Villagers, once skeptical, began to notice the transformation not just in the land, but in the couple themselves. Respect replaced whispers, admiration replaced doubt, and slowly, the story of the rancher and the giant bride became a tale of courage, unity, and the unexpected power of love. In the final weeks of the chapter, Jeb called Eleanor to the highest hill on the ranch, overlooking the land they had fought to sustain. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with fiery streaks of orange and gold. He spoke of dreams for the future, not just theirs, but the legacy they could leave behind. Eleanor, her eyes shining, understood. Together, they envisioned a life where their differences became strengths, where the land was more than property. It was a home built on trust, resilience, and an unbreakable bond. And in that quiet, perfect moment, with the wind carrying the promise of tomorrow across the endless plains, they knew they had found what they had both been seeking, a love that defied expectation, that healed old wounds, and that would endure long after their names were whispered in the town's history.